Hey, welcome to Truth for Today podcast with Terry Fant. I'm your host, Terry Fant, and today you guys are in for a special treat. I have my youngest daughter as my special guest today, Anna Grace. She's called a lot of things. Anna by some teachers, Anna Grace by some friends, AG by a lot of her teammates. I call her most of the time Grace, or one special term I call her is Girl Baby. And she went through a little phase of her life. She didn't really love that, but as she's gotten a little older, she's warmed back up to it. But today what I'd like to talk about is some ideas of parenting, and specifically parenting as a pastor and what it's like to be a pastor's kid, growing up in a culture of the church and also in the church and the culture of the world, and what that's like balancing those, the difficulties of those. And even, I think even not just that, but just maybe even we'll talk about some parenting principles too, maybe as we go along. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you're listening, and maybe God will encourage you and bless you along the way, especially if you're a young pastor with children, or a young pastor, married couple that don't have children yet but plan to. Maybe there's some things that we can share that might encourage you along the way. And if you're a pastor's kid, maybe Anna Grace can share some things that will encourage you along the way too. And so, but parenting in general as well. So, Anna Grace, we're going to talk about just a few things. And what I thought we'd do is just kind of warm up, let them get to know you a little bit. First of all, we'll start out by asking you the question: Do you love being on camera?
No, I do not.
You've always been one that kind of shy about getting in front of people, and and having lots of opportunities to do that in Christmas programs and things like that. You did play, I think, an angel one time, maybe.
I sang one time.
You sang one time? Yeah, I think we have video evidence of that. And all right, so tell me this. What's it like growing up with siblings? And I'll preference this question with this. We've had people say to us before, I don't know what it's like to have a sibling, only child, what have you. So talk a little bit about what it's like having siblings, and really then maybe a little bit in the context of having siblings in being a pastor's kid.
Okay, I love having my siblings. We are very close. We've always been very close. And I feel like having those siblings, it's made me very family-oriented. I love my nieces and nephews so much. Yeah. And it's just always having that person. Like, some people don't have those people. And, like, I know I always have somebody in my siblings.
I refer to it in the marriage context as home team. Mm-hmm. You kind of got a place you can always go back to as home team. And you learn, what sort of things do you learn having siblings? You have to learn, you always don't always get a lot of grit.
Yeah.
A lot of grace.
Yeah.
Not Anna Grace, but a lot of grace, right? Because, some of both, right? You don't, when you have other siblings, you realize you don't always get what you want and how you want it.
Right.
Right? You have to compromise. What any other life lessons you think that people get by, learning to do life with siblings?
Probably just being able to be loving. Like, a lot of people don't have the opportunity in their home. And me, with having a bunch of older siblings, I got to see them and what they went through and learn from their lessons and those type of things. So, like, when my brothers or sisters would do stuff and get in trouble, I'd be like, okay, let me not. Like,
now, wait a minute.
Help me.
Are you trying to tell me that pastors' kids can get into trouble?
Oh, of course.
Okay. And that you can, and another thing, that we humans can learn from other people's mistakes?
Yep, I'll say that.
Two great lessons that we can learn right there, right? So, growing up with siblings in a pastor's home, so what is it? All right, we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, what sort of ministries have you been passionate about over your years?
So, from a very young age, I've always loved doing homeless ministry. Mm-hmm. I've always had a heart for them, for people who don't have houses and whatever, because I just see more than somebody on the street. Like, I see a story behind that, and that comes a lot from my parents and, like, how they raised me up. So that's always been something that I love and have a passion for. And also children's ministry. I love kids. I love working in the nursery.
Let's talk about that homeless ministry thing again. I love what you said there about seeing the person and knowing that there's a story behind. Right. There are events that happened, transpired, and led that person to a place of homelessness, or in the context, drug addiction, different things. And what I hear you saying is you got exposed to that growing up. We don't just discount people because they fall into some particular struggle, but that generally, or not generally, always, there's some background story that leads to that, right? And what we've learned, that we've always taught you, or tried to teach you, is that God loves them right where they are, right? Yeah. And I've always noticed in you have this compassion for people where they are. So, homeless ministry, children, dealing with children, and I would say there's a special need there, right? Because there's so many little kids.
Yeah.
And then what about overseas missions? You ever done anything with overseas missions?
I did. I've been to Haiti one time. We did a medical and dental trip. it was the best experience ever. It's one thing because they have been on a lot. Y'all have been on a lot of mission trips, and to hear about it and see pictures, it's one thing. But to actually go and see and be hands-on and because I have a passion for being in the medical field, so being able to do that and see the overseas, it's just you can't explain it.
Can't explain it. So to take what you're passionate about and use it for the Lord, it's been something that you've learned.
Yes.
And when you do it, you get an opportunity to do it. Man, it's life-giving. That's how I kind of explain it. It's life-giving. Okay, a little bit more about yourself. What have been some of your favorite activities, growing up? Just tell us a little about yourself. Oh, and by the way, she's the caboose. So she's got an older brother named Riley. She's got an older sister named Maddie, another sister named Brooklyn, and then her. And then, of course, we have Marco, who was with us for a while, 17 to about 18, 19. And now he's moved away to North Carolina with his babies. But knowing the context of being the youngest child, tell us about yourself and some of the activities that you enjoy doing growing up.
When I was younger, I loved to play soccer, but I quickly grew out of that because I'm not a runner. And but then I shifted my focus a lot more towards softball. I love playing softball. I love the people that I've met through playing softball. I still have a lot of those friendships and stuff. Later on in high school, I started playing volleyball. Instantly fell in love with it. It was amazing. Like I said, I like medical field. I love learning about the human body, anatomy.
Yeah. You had some special opportunities in the Florence school district, right? Mm-hmm. That dealt with medical sciences. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Florence has a medical science academy where you can go in your 9th grade year and you get one-on-one, a lot more one-on-one than you would in just a regular anatomy and physiology class, where you're in the academy for 4 years and you get to... For me, I got to do student training. So I was under Keir Birch, and we got to go to practices. I did football, I did basketball, and I would just go and make a safe environment for athletes, and then obviously provide water, make sure when they had injuries to take care of them, stuff like that.
Got a lot of hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And right now, you're currently what's your trajectory? What are you doing right now in your career?
I'm finishing up my prereqs, and then I'm headed to nursing school.
Okay, all right. Let me ask you this question. So kind of now transitioning from just learning a little bit about you, so that people just realize that you're just like anybody else, you're a normal child, right? Especially, of course, in my eyes for sure. But knowing that you had common interest, you like sports, you liked the medical profession, things like that. You loved serving people and doing some different things. But there were things along the way. Now we're going to get more into the area of what it's like growing up in the home of a pastor, right? Because in the world, there's this rap. Right? There's this, what's the word I'm looking for here? This
like a stereotype.
Yes,
kind of thing.
A stereotype. So tell me about that. What do you think is the stereotype for someone who's a PK or a pastor's kid?
That from the outside world, we're either perfect or we're the worst of the worst.
No middle ground.
No in between, yeah. There's... Yeah, no middle ground.
No middle ground. Okay. And so growing up, you probably have some special challenges, I've heard it said this way before, and I didn't grow up a pastor's child, right? I grew up, my home was pretty tumultuous, right? Yeah. Tumultuous is the word I'm looking for. And because the home wasn't that. But so growing up for you guys, I've heard people say it's like growing up in a glass bowl, meaning that people kind of looking and watching everything that you do. You said sometime, I heard you say earlier today, I think we were talking, you said sometimes it's like there was a time in certain places that will lift the pastor up onto a pedestal and therefore his family as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but here's some questions. So I know one of the things growing up, you guys were really good at sports. And so with that, in our culture and context, is travel ball. Everybody wants to play travel ball. And it's not always to get a scholarship. It's just that, hey, it's what we like to do. Maybe usually mom and dad are some type of an athlete or living vicariously through their child. Yeah. And so they want to go and do and see and let their kid. And so tell me about, so early on, you were on, invited on travel squads with soccer and things like that, and all your siblings were, and baseball with your brother, but somewhere along there early on we transitioned because we would play some games on Sunday in between, and as your dad, one day I'm sitting there on the sidelines and the Lord's saying, man, you guys are not resting at all, and it's not like a law, it's not like Old Testament law, you're going to hell if you play on Sunday. But the Lord just really began to whisper to my heart that we're not resting at all. We're running to church, we're running here, we're running there. Right. And then I made a decision based on what the Lord was leading me to not play on Sundays anymore. So tell me about what that was like for you in that transition time.
So obviously when I was younger, all my friends were playing. I had built these friendships with all these people, and I was playing with them, and then I wasn't allowed to play on Sunday. So it was obviously hard. I was young. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And but obviously now looking back, I see that my spiritual growth doesn't grow on the softball field.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you can learn lessons there,
Sure.
but it's not going to be like resting and being in the church and, that type of thing. So obviously I've had a huge change of heart since the time being. But
right. Since those big blue eyes cried when I tried to tell you, explain to you. And I remember specifically having the conversation with each one of you guys, explaining why we don't, and the fact that we could play every other day of the week, but just not that day, because we need a day that we set aside to rest and worship the Lord. And those alligator tears, and boy, you talking about tough, make a guy feel like he's the worst thing, meanest dad on earth. But here's another thing: you guys never really lashed back out at me or anything like that. But then to see as you grew up and matured, to begin to appreciate that you need a day to rest, and hopefully that'll carry on the rest of your day. So would you encourage a parent? What would you say to a parent right now that says, my kid, I got to get them into this travel ball so they can get their scholarship and spending, $6,000 a year more at minimum traveling and all. What would you say to a parent who's wrestling with, should I set aside a day to worship God and rest or not? What would you say to that parent?
Well, to me, there's 6 other days of the week where you could go. You could spend your money if you want to. You could practice. You could be in the batting cages. You could be on the soccer field, whatever.
Yeah.
But that has no lasting effect. Even if you go play in the NFL, if you go play MLB, there's no eternal impact of that. So you being on church and being faithful in that is going to have much more impact than being on a softball field on a Sunday for all day.
I think from an 18-year-old, soon to be 19, that is some very wise words of encouragement out there. So I hope that you'll hear that. Let that sink into your heart. This is from one who played and went through all of that. I know a lot of your friends who played every Sunday and every trial didn't get scholarships. A lot of them are struggling with life now, and not just certain, everybody, but still, in my estimation, it would have benefited them a whole lot more. Yeah. The messages they would have heard, the relationships they would have built, and the rest they would have gotten with their families on Sundays. And so I think that's a great word of encouragement from a young person. And of course, as your dad, I hope that's the way you raise your family. All right, so a couple of other things as we're thinking about now. We're talking in the area of being a pastor's child and also parenting. When you think about how that transition, do you love opportunities? Well, I asked you that one already about loving being in front of the camera. And so, but what are here's a big one. All right. So think on this one for a second. And this is the pros and cons of being a pastor's kid. Okay. So think through that for just a minute. We'll go pros and then we'll go cons. Right. Okay. So what are some of the benefits of being a pastor's child? So
obviously having opportunities like this, even though I don't like it, it gets me out of my comfort zone. It makes me say, I can't do this on my own. Yeah. But with God, with the seed that He planted and that my mom planted for all these years of ministry, I don't have to do it on my own, right? Yeah. So obviously that's one big benefit. And also I've seen my friends and just other people have terrible home lives and their dads being absent and things like that. And it's just wow. Yeah.
Yeah. They missed out on some things that hurt them. So pros. And then what about cons? Okay, so this would be really what's been difficult about growing up in a home where your dad is the pastor?
Probably you said, living in a glass bowl. Everybody's looking in, being is she gonna mess up? Is she gonna be the bad kid? I've had teachers tell me crazy stuff, it's just crazy what people will say.
Maybe, I want to say, I remember you saying one time, like your first day of class or the first week of class, you're so-and-so's daughter, and so I know about preacher's kids, and they may tell you some crazy story about a preacher's kid who did some terrible things.
Yeah, I get that a lot. You're Terry Fant's daughter, and not that that's a bad thing, obviously, but it's just why is that different for me than, why do people put pastors' families on the pedestal? Right. This has been something I've always struggled with, because it's we're no different.
Yeah, he's just an average dude. Yeah. Or maybe less than average, but So we watch how that's transpired, raising children, and I obviously coming into the ministry, I was laying asphalt at the time, and now I'm for the first 4 years of bivocational, I was laying asphalt and pastoring, and I oftentimes thought about, how do I want to raise my children in ministry. And so because some people say, you can't be your children's pastor. Well, I mean, I think you can. Mm-hmm. But for me, I always wanted to, and I want you to hear your input on this. I tried not to, and I'm not saying I did it perfectly, preach to y'all every day of your lives.
Right. And you didn't. A lot of times he would, obviously pour into us as he,
what we used to call it, teaching time with Terry.
Yeah. He would pour into us, but it wasn't ever like he was above us and he was preaching down to us because we had messed up or because, whatever. It was always just like planting a seed. It was never like he's better than us, so he's going to preach down to us.
I hoped to approach it this way, and I would encourage every parent to do it this way, not just in ministry, but raise your children to make good decisions. Don't raise them just to do what you say do, because there'll be a time when mom and dad aren't around. Right. How many times have I told you guys that? Hey, I want you to make good decisions. Right. Weigh it. Know what God's will is. And know, the difference between his will and our wants, because sometimes, with all of us, they can be off. But then secondly, what are the benefits of doing it his way versus the consequences of doing it my way? Yeah, and you've got to make that decision because Daddy's not always going to be around. Right? Yeah. So tell a little bit about that. There are moments in your life where you get out there and you got to make a decision. Any of us have ever lived perfect, but, are there times when it's helped you to say, okay, I got to weigh the...
oh, yeah, for sure. So, he gave us, and Mom, too, gave us the freedom of choosing, whichever way. It was never like, you have to pick this, and if you don't pick this, then you're in trouble.
You're telling me then that your mama and I didn't lock you in a room and never let you go and do anything and experience anything? No. One of the things early on, I decided that if I waited until y'all got out of the house before I let you go out after dark.
Go haywire.
Yeah. And how many people do you know that happened to? Their parents were overly strict. And now I'm not telling parents out there not to hold the line and not to have standards. But at the same time, as you teach, there comes a point when they're 17, 18, 19 where they've got to go and you got to allow them to go some places. Right. I remember a time with your brother, and he's the oldest, where he came outside and I was raking leaves, and he's kind of just, Riley can be kind of quiet sometimes, and he's kind of beating around the bush, and I said, son, what is it, And he's like, Dad, so-and-so's having a party, and he didn't ever ask. He just said, so-and-so's having a party. I said, well, do you want to go? And he was like a junior in high school or senior in high school. He said, yes, sir. He said, but so-and-so's going to be there. And, of course, he mentioned somebody's name who had caused a lot of trouble, And I'm like, okay. And he said, and there might be some drinking there. I don't know. And I said, well, are you going to drink? No, sir. I said, well, if you give me your word that you're not going to go, and I know where you're going to be, and I'm going to see you when you leave and when you get back, and okay. And so, a little while later, he goes on in the house. I finish up raking leaves. I come on in the house about 8:30, 9 o'clock. He comes downstairs. I'm like, I thought you were going to party. He said, nah, I decided not to. But giving you opportunities, not keeping, let me say it this way, not hands off,
right, but
allowing you a little bit of liberty to kind of understand you got to make the decisions. There's consequences that come with one or the other. Yeah. All right. What would you say about, okay, how about this? You remember our times growing up that we would meet at the table. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean like the family meeting times, right? I'll talk about that in a minute. But when we would come to supper.
Oh, yeah.
And supper meaning dinner in the evening. And we would bring our Bibles. Everybody would bring their Bibles. And what would happen is, remember, I would teach through, I might be going through a certain book, and I would just I'd read a little bit and we'd talk about it. And I remember as we're teaching through and lessons, and then we'd ask for y'all for prayer requests, what happened that day. And man, what a sweet time, I thought. Yeah. Tell me your perspective on those times. What was it like for you?
So from being at a young age and growing up in the church and growing up with a family who pours into me, it's a lot easier now to, for one, dissect the word. It's a lot easier for me because at such a young age we did that as a family. It's easier for me now to be like, not that I understand everything,
sure,
but that it's easier to be like, okay, this is kind of what this means and this is how it affects me, and then also you taking that and being like, okay, this is how I need to be with my family when I have my own family.
Yeah. So that it's not a weird taboo thing, but it's something that's organic, natural, and that you do. It's just who we are. It's not. I remember one particular situation where a counselor told me about one of you guys. You can't be their pastor, or you can't be their preacher. And I said, well, if you're asking me to not talk about God around them, you got the wrong guy, because I'm not a dad who's a Christian. I happen to be a Christian who has the blessing of being a father. Right. And if I left God out, they would think I've been drugged or something, you know. And so it's been a great journey. So what about the aspect of, and I've heard you and your siblings talk about this before, the aspect of having so many eyes in the community?
It's it's a weight. It's because you never know, like you said earlier, you never know, like, does he know my dad? Does he know my mom? Like, do they know my parents? And then also from the other side, like, people, I don't know, it's just a weird, like, dynamic of, like, how we act outside. It's almost like they're, like, watching to see if you mess up, to go be like, look what Terry's daughter did, or Terry's son did.
Now, you've told me before that people have asked you a common question, right? About the person that I am.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that.
So my whole life growing up, I've heard 1,000,005 times, is your dad the same guy at church as he is at home? And I just have to laugh because, like, I don't know any different. Like, who he is at church and who he is around everybody is how he is at home. Like, he's no different. So
for the and that no different she's talking about is that I'm imperfect in the pulpit and I'm imperfect at home. But we don't disassociate our relationship with the Lord.
Right. It's not something that just happens at church. No, like, that's a weird question. Flip a switch
or something, you know. And it's weird. It's weird, but I think it's because some people do.
Yeah.
And so I want to speak to that a little bit in parenting as a whole, not just pastoral parenting, but parenting as a whole, meaning it is one of the most dangerous, disruptive, and damaging thing a parent can do is to say one thing and do another.
Right.
I've heard parents say this before. Well, they see me doing it, but I tell them not to, and they better do what I say. And that's not, I don't think that's good parenting. Do you?
Right. Mm-mm.
No. So
it's
when
like
you have
being inconsistent.
Yeah, you're seeing your parent. Go ahead.
How do you expect them to do different when you're not leading by example?
What would happen if I was telling you not to do something, but you're watching me do it?
I'm going to laugh.
Yeah, you're thinking, in your head, you're thinking,
I'm going to be confused. Like, why?
Why not? If he can.
Right.
When I'm an adult or whatever,
right.
Why can't I? And man, what a damaging thing. To parents out there, I would say consistency is key,
right.
Both in reward, both in consequences, consistency. Not one way, one day another, but consistency in who we are, but also in the guidelines that we expect our children to hold on to, right? Mm-hmm. Because I've thought about this too, and I want to hear your thoughts on this because I'll spring this one on you.
Okay.
But I've talked a little bit about what it means to, I think one of the hardest parts about parenting is before a person is saved, they only are acting out the nature of Adam. Now, when I say the nature of Adam, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, like lost people act lost.
Yes, lost people act lost. Adam and Eve, the nature of Adam passed down. Until we're born again, we have that nature. And even when we're born again, we fight that nature, but now with the Spirit and the Word. But we have this nature of Adam in us, and before a child's saved, we're trying to shape that.
Right.
Through taking phones and if somebody does corporal punishment or spanking, then that, time out, whatever, you're trying to shape the nature of Adam with consequences. Right. And I heard it said this way one time. A little boy's daddies told him, said, sit down. And the little boy didn't sit down. He said, son, I said, sit down. And the little boy's standing up, and he says one more time to him, he says, I'm not going to tell you again, sit down, I'm going to bust your tail. And the little boy sits down, and his daddy is looking at him, and his little boy looks at him and says, but I'm standing on the inside. And that's the nature of Adam.
Right.
And so so parenting-wise, man, it's so important that you have boundary lines clearly defined, don't you think?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, did you know what me and your mom expected of you?
Oh, yeah.
You never were confused about that? It wasn't one way one day and one the next. You knew there was a standard, right, that we expected. But at the same time, you tell me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, did we allow room for error?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It was never like, I'll put it this way. I wasn't sheltered in a way that was like, I'm curious of what's out there. Like, they let me see it in a way that was like, okay, you see that that's bad. You see the damage that it can do. So now learn from it. Not like you can never see it, and then once you get 21 or once you go to college,
then you can go experience it and go try.
Yeah.
Because then you're away from mom and dad, and anyway. So you remember, you probably never heard me talk on this, but on what I call inductive parenting. when you guys were little, I decided early that it was better for me not to just say, don't do drugs and don't drink and don't, And the reason was, in Romans 7, Paul says that the law activates sin. Meaning when I'm told what I have to do or what I cannot do.
I want to do it.
Yeah, I want to do it, right? And it's like, okay, why can't I do that? There have been all kind of psychological tests where they put kids in a room. They say, all right, y'all can go anywhere you want in here. Just don't go in that one door in the corner. And every kid, they put a camera and leave the room, and every kid's gravitating toward that door, And so inductive parenting, instead of giving you a law that activates a desire, don't do this, don't do that. And I'm not saying that we should never do that, but if that's the only parenting style I have, instead, I would read a verse to you from the scriptures, such as 1 Peter 5:8, that says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I would ask you guys the question, hey, why do you think he says be sober? Instead of sitting down and saying, hey, y'all don't do drugs or don't get out of your, because it's not, be sober doesn't just mean don't be drunk or high.
Right.
It means be in your right mind, right? And a lot of things can change your right mind. But then I would ask y'all the question, I don't know if you remember this, I'm about to say, hey, why do you think he said be sober? And y'all would say, oh, I know, Dad. Or y'all would look at me and I'd say, well, let me ask you, have you ever heard anybody stand up in front of the church and say, I'm so glad that I smoked marijuana and it led me to alcohol and then I lost my family. I'm so thankful that, and y'all would laugh at me like you're doing now, like, no, Dad. And then I'd say, okay, well then, have you ever heard anybody stand up and say, man, I got involved with this drug or that and it ruined my life and y'all were like, yeah, and y'all start naming names.
Yeah.
You say, yeah, so because you'd heard testimonies at church, And so inductive parenting was putting the information in front of you and letting you see the consequences and the statistics and what happens, and then let you formulate in your mind inductively, hey, good. Again, raising you to make right decisions based on information.
Right, and I feel like it would be harder to do that type of parenting if you weren't faithful in the church, because at home, if you're like, look at them, they did drugs, or whatever. But if you're in church and your kid is hearing it from a testimony perspective, it produces a healthy fear instead of like, ew, look at them, I don't ever want to be like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a healthy fear as in, I don't want to get involved in that because that will burn me.
To ruin me, yeah.
And not, I don't want to get involved with them,
right? Because
God loves them, and they're oh, amen. Yeah, that's a good word. So inductive parenting. Okay, some other things. What about? So I don't know if you remember, like corporal punishment. We were corporal punishment people, right? but we adopted a thing where you got one lick. We had a little wooden board. I don't know if you remember that, because it didn't last long. As long as we were consistent, and we tried to. And what happened is you get to 8, 9 years old, you're not doing it anymore because you knew the consequences. You learned. But do you remember times when we'd say, all right, you get one lick, and it wasn't if you broke a cup. It was always if we gave you a direct command and you weighed it and you chose to go your way, right?
Right. And I feel like a lot of people are like, man, my parents beat me when I was younger. Like, I don't ever, like, I remember being punished and like getting whoopings and stuff, but it was never like, oh my gosh, like I'm scared of them. Like, it was never.
You learned there was a set consequence that was coming, right?
Right.
All right. So tell me this: do you look forward to having children?
I do.
You think the Lord has that for you?
I hope.
Yeah. How many children do you want to have?
Like 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. That means I get to be pop times a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other thoughts on? What would be one piece of advice you would give to first a couple in the ministry and their parenting? What would you say to them? Well, one more thing would you want them to get from your perspective?
I would say from a child who's dealt with this for almost 19 years now, it's hard to not, or I don't know this, but I know it would be hard to not have a safe place. So going home and not being like under that stereotype or feeling like I have to be perfect or whatever at home, and having that room for failure, like we said, and feeling like I don't have to be scared to tell them when I messed up or scared of my parents, like being able to trust them and be myself and, but also be led. So I feel like that's a really big thing, like lead your kids, but don't force and stereotype on them.
Okay, so does that fall in line with the model of Jesus' leadership?
I think so, yeah.
The shepherd, you can't drive sheep. I don't know if you knew this, but you've probably heard me say that a lot. But you can't drive sheep. They'll scatter. But a shepherd has to be trusted by the sheep, and they'll walk behind and follow him. So you're saying give them a good example to follow. Is that right?
Yep.
And give them some room for error. Love them where they are.
And don't preach to them.
Don't preach to them all the time, right? And I tried not to do that with you
And
guys.
the only time, like, he never preached down to us, like I said earlier. He never was like, okay, today we're going to talk about this. And
I didn't send you a verse every time that you messed up?
No.
No.
No, he was very real. Like, he knows that I was going to mess up, but he's not ever going to be like, you're terrible for messing up.
All right, so what about parents that have children that are struggling? What would you say to them? This doesn't have to be ministry, but what would you say to a parent whose child has made some bad decisions?
I would say love them through it, just like Jesus loves us through it. Just like, we're called to love people. So instead of, obviously if they're going through something, they need somewhere, like I said, like the safe space. They need somewhere to feel like they're loved instead of, if they're going through something on the outside of their home, they need to go home and be like, okay, my parents love me anyway.
Yeah.
So loving your kids through that. Don't get fed up with them. I know it's hard because I know they got fed up with me.
No way.
But, just being gracious and knowing that you weren't perfect when you grew up either. So
giving them some standards, be consistent, have some boundary lines and consequences when you cross them, but know more than anything for the child to know that they're loved and they can come and talk to them, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today, a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos in the culture and the way of thinking, and I think that's great advice, that home needs to be built on truth, love, grace, mercy, direction, consistency. And the only way that's going to happen is if we stay plugged into Jesus, fed by the Word. And so I want to encourage you as a mom and dad, stay in the Word of God. Let the Spirit of God lead you. Be directed by the Word. I would say don't preach to them. Teach them in moments of every day. Give some teaching time. But don't stand on the pulpit and preach down. Love them. And, hey, if you have a pastor, if you're part of a church, love your pastor and love their children. Their children just like your children, no different. And so thank you for joining us for this episode. And I hope you join us for the next episode as we continue on this journey, learning what it means to walk with Jesus.